March 31st, 2026. A former United States congressman sits down with a podcast host and says something that stops the room. He says that while he's still serving in office, a uniformed soldier, a senior enlisted man in the United States Army, came to his congressional office, not a classified facility, not a secure room, his own office in Florida, with his staff in the room, and that soldier briefed him. The briefing described locations, facilities, a program where captured non-human beings were forced into breeding programs with humans, specifically designed to produce something new, a hybrid built for one purpose: intergalactic communication. If that sentence is false, it should have been easy to deny, but no one has denied it. By Wednesday, a sitting member of the House UAP subcommittee, a man who sat in classified briefings, who serves on the committee examining this topic under oath, was on national television. He was asked about it. Here's what he did not say. He did not say he'd never heard of anything like that. He didn't say his colleague had gone a bit too far. And he didn't deny it. What he said was this.
Down by former colleague of yours, Matt Gaetz, making some pretty shocking statements yesterday about aliens. Take a look.
I had someone come and brief me who was in a military uniform, worked for the United States Army, that was briefing me on the locations of hybrid breeding programs where captured aliens were breeding with humans to create some hybrid race that could engage in intergalactic communication. Aliens that were living were in forced breeding programs with humans.
All right. I mean, I don't have the tinfoil hat on just yet, Congressman, but I'm wondering, kind of how you react to that, because you are connected. You're on the UFO subcommittee. I mean, I'm just wondering what you make of that. Have you heard anything like that?
Well, I'm still a member of Congress, so I can't really comment too much on what Matt said. But I will say this.
Wait, seriously? Are you being serious, or is that tongue in cheek?
I'm being 100% serious. Okay. I'm being 100% serious.
He didn't deny it. What he said was this. And then, without being asked, he volunteered this.
I was briefed. I'll just tell you this. I was briefed last week on an issue, or 2 weeks ago, and it would have set the earth off. This country would have come unglued, I think, if they would have heard all that I heard. They would demand answers.
And then one more thing.
Wow.
And for the record, I'm not suicidal, and I don't take risks.
I'm Buddy T, and this is Beyond the Map. I want to say something before we go any further. I'm not here tonight to tell you that aliens created us, and I'm not here to ask you to believe the most extraordinary version of anything you hear. What I am here to do is what I was trained to do. I want to look at how this claim is being handled, because sometimes the most important information in an investigation isn't what someone says, it's what they don't say when they had every opportunity to. Tonight, we trace this claim across 3 decades of documented institutional sources, some of which are sitting in the congressional record right now. So get comfortable, sit back, and let's go. There is a man named Dan Sherman. He's not famous, not on the circuit. He wrote a book in 1998. He gave a single major interview in October of 2025. And he spent most of the years since his discharge in deliberate quiet. In my experience, the ones who don't want attention are the ones worth paying attention to. Sherman served 12 years in the Air Force as a technical sergeant and electronics intelligence specialist. His DD-214 and his NSA training certificate have been reviewed by independent researchers. He's not a hobbyist. He's not a performer. When journalist Jesse Michaels sat down with him for nearly 4 hours in October 2025, what struck me wasn't what he claimed, it was how. Flat, technical, the cadence of a man describing what had happened to him. In the early 1990s, while attending a classified continuation course at the NSA complex in Maryland, he was pulled aside and read into a program within a program. A gray project nested inside a black one, hidden beneath work that was itself classified. That program was called Project Preserve Destiny. The Air Force captain who read him in told him something he'd not been prepared for. The program had existed since 1960, its origins traced to 1947, and it had been set in motion before Sherman was born because his mother, he was told, had been taken while she was pregnant with him in 1963. During that event, something had been done to the fetus she was carrying. He had been altered genetically to give him an enhanced capacity for telepathic communication, not with other humans, with them. Now, what I just described is either one of the most significant programs in the history of the United States government, or it is the account of one man who can't be independently confirmed on the most extraordinary parts of his story. Both of these things can be true at the same time, so let's look at what can actually be verified. Sherman's military service is documented. His NSA training is documented, not in dispute. A researcher named Noah Raddick submitted a Freedom of Information Act request about Project Preserve Destiny. Standard procedure. He sent it to the Air Force. The Air Force did not respond with a denial. The Air Force forwarded the request, unprompted, without being asked, directly to NSA. An inquiry about a program that supposedly doesn't exist goes to the Air Force, and then the Air Force immediately says, "That's not ours, go to the NSA." The NSA's response cited Executive Order 13526. They didn't say the program doesn't exist. They cited the order that protects classified national defense material. But there's more. And this next part is the kind of thing that shouldn't exist if this story is fiction. The Black Vault is the largest Freedom of Information Act clearinghouse in the country, maybe in the world. In 1999, the NSA released to researcher John Greenwald their own internal case management log. Every request the agency had received in early 1998. It was signed by Barbara Paisley, chief of the FOIA PA services at Fort George G. Meade, on official letterhead. One entry from that log, case number 9208-98, requester Paul Schwar, filed January 2nd, 1998, subject UFO, Project Preserve Destiny. The National Security Agency assigned that inquiry a case number. Now, you do not get a case number from the NSA for a program that exists only in someone's imagination. Now, here's the part that changes the evidentiary landscape entirely. In November 2024, journalist Michael Schellenberger submitted testimony to a House Oversight Committee hearing on UAP. Attached is the 117-page UAP timeline compiled by a current or former U.S. government intelligence officer submitted into the official congressional record. That timeline references Project Preserve Destiny by name multiple times with specific dates, with specific documentation. It states in the congressional record that in January 1963, the first embryo was produced under Project Preserve Destiny, a program designed to develop people with intuitive communication abilities to communicate with non-human intelligence. It references Sherman's actual military change of station orders from December of 1993, a physical document, his transfer from PPD location 1 to PPD location 2. Clearances are listed as top secret, secret compartmented information, and SBI. And it records what Sherman says he was told during 10 months of what the program called higher plane contact. I'm going to read these slowly. They're in the congressional record. Anyone can pull them up. NHI has visited Earth for a very long time. Any entity that realizes its own existence and has intellect has a soul. Earth is in geological infancy. Humans should expect much change. Basque people are most likely to be hybrids. An NHI entity communicating through a classified NSA program with a U.S. Air Force sergeant, identifying a specific human ethnic group as the most likely carrier of the hybrid genetics. Now, whether that claim is true or not is not the point of this episode. The point is that it exists in the congressional record of a House Oversight Committee hearing, in the public record right now. That claim that made headlines on Tuesday has been sitting in the congressional testimony since 2023. So let's recap where we are. Verified Air Force sergeant, documented NSA training, a FOIA trail. The Air Force immediately redirected him to the NSA without being prompted. Cited national security classification, case number in the NSA's own internal log, and that program name, its stated purpose, its personnel records, and the content of its alleged NHI communications, all in the congressional record of the United States House of Representatives. That is the floor of this story. The ceiling, I don't know, but the floor is real. Now, let's talk about why it's not alone. The core claim here that non-human intelligence have a long-term biological stake in human genetics and that the U.S. government has been operationally involved with non-human intelligence rather than merely observing them doesn't appear only in the Sherman account. It appears 3 times at least from 3 completely independent directions across 35 years. The same congressional timeline contains this. 2 scientists connected to the DIA and the NSA state this, face to face with a journalist, that the U.S. government contractors are engaged in programs to, quote, control non-human intelligence and harness those NHI for military and intelligence purposes. November 1991, 35 years before Matt Gaetz said. Now, those same scientists said the ET scenario, physical alien beings, may be disinformation deployed to protect what the actual programs involve. They described what they were witnessing as evil. They described moral discomfort. Dan Sherman used the words morally compromised to explain why he requested a discharge. 2 sources, no coordination, decades apart, same moral weight. Version 2, 1990 through 1995. That's Sherman, a program that found humans altered before birth by NHI and deployed them as communication assets. The government didn't create the modification. They found it and they used it. Version 3, 2026. A uniformed Army soldier in a Florida office talked about forced breeding, living NHI, hybrids designed for intergalactic communication. 3 versions, 1 single claim, 35 years elapsed, and no apparent coordination. If even 1 layer of this is accurate, this isn't a UFO story. It's a human story. It's a story about what we are and who decided not to tell us. Now, 2 more voices, because this pattern doesn't live only inside the classified world. Gary Nolan, Stanford University, 350 published papers, 50 U.S. patents. DoD Till Innovator Award. In 2011, the CIA came into his office unannounced and put medical files on his desk. Injuries in intelligence personnel who had encountered UAP. Now, he's been studying biological effects ever since. In October 2025, he gave a public podcast appearance titled UAP, NHI, DNA, and the Origins of Life by Dr. Gary Nolan. It was a MUFON podcast in October of 2025. When asked directly whether NHI may have tampered with human DNA, Nolan said the evidence isn't ready for peer review. He said, "Don't go down too many rabbit holes." He called the hypothesis that humans might be a genetic product campfire ghost stories. He also said, maybe they're real. From a man of his credentials, that word carries weight it wouldn't carry from anyone else in this conversation. Jim Semivan, Central Intelligence Agency, 34 years, 25 years as an operations officer in the National Clandestine Service, Career Intelligence Medal. In 1990, entities appeared at the foot of his bed. His wife bled unexplainably for 17 days, and Semivan found a circular hole on the back of his neck, about the size of a pencil eraser. When he told a CIA colleague, that colleague immediately asked about the bleeding and the neck mark without being told about them. The institutional pattern recognition was already there. Semivan has said that people with access above his own described the full truth as indigestible, not classified, not dangerous to national security, indigestible. When pressed on why, he pointed not toward technology, he pointed toward what he calls the architecture of the real. The possibility that what human beings understand about themselves, where we came from and what we are, is not what we've been told. So let's recap the full pattern. In 1991, DIA and NSA connected scientists described U.S. contractors harnessing NHI for military purposes on the congressional record. 1990 through 1995, a verified Air Force sergeant describes a classified NSA program using non-human intelligence modified humans as communication assets. NSA log, congressional record. In 2025, a Stanford immunologist with DoD access won't rule out that NHI biological involvement in human genetics is real. And in 2025, a 34-year CIA operations officer says insiders describe the full truth as indigestible, not for security reasons, for identity reasons. In 2026, a uniformed Army soldier briefs a congressman on hybrid breeding programs. A sitting UAP committee member says he can't comment and that what he's been told would unglue the country. Now that's the pattern. Let's talk about that Wednesday. And then something happened that changed the temperature of this story. A sitting member of the House UAP subcommittee was asked on national television about what Matt Gaetz had said. Now, before we look deep at his response, let me be clear about Gaetz. He has some credibility problems. He resigned from Congress under pressure. His account of a non-classified briefing from a uniformed soldier is procedurally unusual, to say the least. And he acknowledged that he had not independently verified what he was told. Those are the real limitations, and this story doesn't depend on Gaetz being reliable. Because the moment that matters is not what Gaetz said, it's how Tim Burchett responded. Context first. In 2023, Burchett and Gaetz, along with others, attempted to gain access to a facility at Eglin Air Force Base where they believed UAP materials were stored. They were refused entry. A sitting congressman with committee standing on this issue was turned away at the gate. Now, that's not a man who came to this fresh. Let's apply the framework. I'm still a member of Congress, so I can't really comment too much on what Matt said. That's not, I've never heard of anything like that. That is a legal constraint, the language of someone who is bound not to talk. Then, without being asked, he volunteered his own briefing 2 weeks prior, something that would unglue this country. Then, for the record, I'm not suicidal and I don't take risks. That sentence exists because people associated with this subject have died under circumstances that didn't satisfy those who knew them. And Burchett well knows that history. He said it anyway, on camera. Now, what he didn't say, he could have said he'd never heard of anything like what Gates was describing, but he didn't. He could have expressed skepticism or taken a tongue-in-cheek approach to this, but he didn't. He could have distanced himself from the hybrid claim specifically, but he didn't. The innocent explanation, is it possible that Burchett was being dramatic, that his briefing was mundane, that he was just deflecting? Yes, all that's possible. But I'm not suicidal and I don't take risk is not a deflection. That's a very specific signal from someone who understands the field he's standing in. Now, in my career, I've read a lot of witness responses. That one reads like someone managing what they know and how much they can carry into the public realm. That's the behavior of someone who knows, not the behavior of someone who doesn't know. Let me put this together. A verified Air Force sergeant, a FOIA trail that went straight to the NSA, a case number in the NSA's own internal logs, and that program's name, its stated purpose, and the content of the alleged NHI communications in the congressional record of the United States House of Representatives. 2 DIA and NSA connected scientists in 91 describing U.S. contractors harnessing NHI for military purposes, also in the congressional record. And a Stanford immunologist who won't rule out that the question of NHI biological involvement in human evolution deserves serious scientific investigation. A 34-year CIA operations officer with a physical mark on the back of his neck, he says the full picture has been described to him as indigestible, not for security reasons, but because of what it implies about what we are. And a sitting member of the House UAP subcommittee who, when asked about a specific claim involving NHI breeding programs and human hybrids, responded not with denial, but with constraint, with "I can't comment," essentially, followed immediately by his own recent briefing, followed by a statement that he's not suicidal. Now, here's what I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to tell you that non-human intelligences genetically modified the human species. I can't verify that. I'm not going to tell you that Project Preserve Destiny is exactly what Dan Sherman says it is. Classified doesn't mean true. It just means protected. What I am going to tell you is this. 4 independent sources, separated by decades, in completely different institutional contexts, with no apparent coordination, have each touched on this same claim, that NHI have a biological stake in human genetics that is not recent and not over, that the people who have been briefed on the full picture describe it as not a national security puzzle, but as something that changes what human beings understand about themselves. And the people with the clearance to deny this on the record under their own names have chosen not to deny it. Now, that's not the same as confirmation, but it's also not nothing. There's one more thing, and I keep coming back to it. If this claim is wrong, if there is no program, no hybrid program, nothing in those briefings that resembles what Sherman described or what Gates was told, it should be easy to say so. One sentence, one press release, one statement under oath. No one has said it. Jim Semivan called the full truth indigestible. I don't know what he knows. I don't know what Burchett knows. I don't know what is at the bottom of this particular well, but I know what a denial looks like, and I know what the absence of one usually means in an investigation. If you followed this to the end with me, I want to ask you something. Not what you believe. What do you notice? What would it take? One piece of evidence, one statement, one document for the denial to be convincing? Tell me in the comments, because that question is where this investigation goes next. This is Beyond the Map. I'm Buddy T. Stay curious, stay grounded, and I'll see you next time.